Sometimes, as much as we want to be green, economic constraints force us to settle for a less environmentally friendly solution. But for cooling, the greenest solution is the cheapest solution: evaporative cooling. Evaporative cooling is cheaper to buy and install than traditional air conditioning, has lower operating costs, produces fewer greenhouse gases, and is healthier. Plus, unlike traditional DX air conditioning, which becomes less effective as the temperature rises, evaporative cooling becomes more effective as the temperature rises. This brief video explains how evaporative cooling works and its many benefits. 5 varieties of evaporative cooling allow for maximum flexibility. With direct evaporative cooling, outside air is blown through a water-saturated medium, usually cellulose, and cooled by evaporation. Direct evaporative cooling adds moisture to the primary airstream. Because the Pacific Northwest has dry summers, more moisture in the air usually increases comfort. With indirect evaporative cooling, a secondary airstream is cooled by water. The cooled secondary airstream goes through a heat exchanger, where it cools the primary airstream. Indirect evaporative cooling does not add moisture to the primary airstream. With indirect direct evaporative cooling, the primary airstream is cooled with indirect evaporative cooling, and then cooled further with direct evaporative cooling. Moisture is added to the primary airstream. With indirect evaporative cooling, the primary airstream is cooled by indirect evaporative cooling. Then the cooled water passes through the wet side of a coil, which further cools the primary airstream. No moisture is added to the primary airstream. With indirect evaporative cooling with DX backup, the primary airstream is cooled with indirect evaporative cooling. Most of the time, this cools the primary airstream to the desired temperature. But when more cooling is required, the supplemental DX module further cools the air until it reaches the desired temperature. The supplemental DX can be sized to a fraction of what a DX-only system must be sized at. Now that we know how evaporative cooling works, let's look at its many benefits. Evaporative cooling costs less than traditional air conditioning. It generally cuts mechanical equipment costs 25 to 65%. Provides 100% outside air cooling at less than half the energy cost of mechanical equipment's return air cooling, increases existing equipment cooling capacities without adding mechanical cooling, and increases compressor and heat exchanger life when used in conjunction with DX. The paradox of traditional air conditioning is that the hotter it gets, the less effective it becomes, just when you need cooling the most. Evaporative cooling, on the other hand, becomes more effective as the temperature rises. Evaporative cooling works in all areas of the country, not just in hot, dry climates. Although damp in winter, the Pacific Northwest is dry in summer. Humidity in this region almost always decreases as the temperature increases, and so the cooling power of evaporative systems increases. Because evaporative cooling does not use chlorofluorocarbons, it does not contribute to ozone depletion. Evaporative cooling is healthy and comfortable because it brings in outside air and exhausts stale air, smoke, odors, and germs. It helps maintain natural humidity levels. And it does not need an airtight structure for maximum efficiency, so building occupants can open doors and windows. In many locations, and for many applications, evaporative cooling is all the cooling you need to maintain a comfortable indoor environment. In hotter areas, or where cooling loads are high, such as in office buildings, one of the most useful applications for indirect evaporative cooling is supplementing a chiller or DX system. By cooling the airstream before it reaches the cooling coil, an indirect evaporative unit extends compressor life, cuts energy costs, and provides the boost the compressor needs to function effectively on hot days. In a short video, we can give you only a brief overview of evaporative cooling. Read the white paper on our website or contact Westcor for more information on evaporative cooling. Thank you.